I think this is the beginning of a new kind of era or mini era in politics in our country. We've had populists for a long time on the right wing of life. We haven't really had left wing populists, and we've never had green populists. I think that Zack, in effect, beat the establishment in this election. He's a strong, clear voice on the left and green side of life, and I think we need that. I think he's a bad man. He's an extreme right wing person. You've got to remember the Nazi-esque salute that he gave only recently, the way he treats workers, the way he treated all of those workers in government while he ran his dodgy Doge outfit. He's a bad man. I say we don't actually want him over here for anything. He's a massive twat.
Dale, I think we'll start with Zack Polanski, if you don't mind. He's just been elected leader of the Green Party. What was your reaction?
I'm excited, actually. He's standing on this platform of green populism. He calls it eco-populism, but it's straight out of my book, where I define green populism as communicating in the way that the populists do, like Farage, Trump, Johnson, in a way that cuts through, but stopping short of telling lies. Zach has said exactly the same things in his definition of eco-populism, and so I feel like the I don't know what you call the inspiration for that, but I'm really pleased to see a politician pick it up as particularly the leader of a party. I think this is the beginning of a new kind of era or mini era in politics in our country. We've had populists for a long time on the right wing of life. We haven't really had left wing populists, and we've never had green populists. So I'm excited to see what he can do with it, and what might happen. I think it. Kind of sets the cat among the pigeons to a degree. The Green Party could become rejuvenated. I know they did quite well at the election last time, but I do think they were quite staid in their approach. I think that Zach, in effect, beat the establishment in this election.
He beat the establishment. What do you mean? Adrian Ramsey is the establishment?
Yes, he
And
did.
just to pick you up there as well on Nigel Farage, your comments there, Zack Polanski is populism without the lies. Are you saying that Farage is a liar?
Well, he tells lies. He has told lies, isn't he? I mean, he was on Sky TV a few weeks ago claiming that within days a reform council up north had saved £1 million off a council software bill. And then the councils put their hands up and said, actually, we're paying the exact same sum of money as we were going to pay before they got elected. It just disappeared. Now, it could be a mistake. It could be, just something like that. But when you see a pattern of them, like over Brexit, the idea that Brexit would be good for us, that we could have our cake and eat it. I know that was a Johnson lie, but all of that kind of universe of Brexit porky pies, let's say. I think he's loose with the truth. It's probably better to say it that way. But at some point, it amounts to telling lies, doesn't it? And and in my definition of green populism, I simply say, look, these populists, they cut through incredibly well. They go too far. They do tell lies, but they cut through really well. They simplify. They're not dry and detailed. They communicate in a way that people hear.
Do you think that Polanski's lines, or do you think his sort of like liberal or almost socialist take on politics will be enough to combat? We've got a very febrile atmosphere in the UK at the moment. We've seen the rise of protests outside asylum hotels. It feels like a tinderbox here at the moment. There's a lot of anger and a lot of pressure building. Do you think Polanski can battle that or combat it?
I think he can actually. I think it's a good question because I hadn't thought about that. But I think he can because he's a strong, clear voice on the left and green side of life, and I think we need that. One of the things that kind of drives me slightly crazy is that Farage and Reform are making a big deal about immigration right now. They're stoking division. I think it's a really bad thing to do. Um, but immigration was one of Farage's big topics in the Brexit debate. We had to take back control of our borders and therefore of our immigration numbers. And the big thing that happened after Brexit is the immigration numbers doubled. We lost control of immigration. And now Farage pops up trying to make political capital out of the disaster that immigration became after Brexit, his pet project.
Mm. I mean, the hypocrisy is there, but it's how do you combat that? How do you calm people down? Because the fury certainly is there at the moment.
Yeah, I always think the statistics help. If you look at the number of people crossing the channel out of total immigration into our country, it's about 4%. It's a tiny figure. It's getting all of the attention. I think the Tories are responsible for that before reform came along, actually. And then again, if you look at the number of immigrants that have been accused of sexual offense or sexual assault crimes and stuff like that, it's got to be a very tiny, tiny number. But what we've got are populist politicians just conflating the two things and saying, an immigrant has been accused of sexual assault, therefore all immigrants are sexual assaulters and that kind of stuff. And that's a terrible thing that they're doing, but we can counter that with facts, numbers.
You flagrantly hung a Palestine flag on the outside of your Ecotricity building in Stroud. And according to the Daily Mail, there was uproar, there was anger. Did you feel that anger?
No, this I have to say it is flagrant, it's blatant, it's 10 meters long, it's a massive, great big thing. And it was the Telegraph that kicked it off, actually. They sent a couple of journalists here. I happened to meet them in the town, in a cafe, and they said, we've been sent here to find some dissent over the flag. They said, we can't find any, right? But when the story came out, the story was all about how Stroud was divided, it was a bitter row and all this kind of stuff. So we thought, all right, we'll have an opinion poll. And we found that 60% of the people in Stroud support what was called my right to fly the Palestinian flag. And something like two-thirds of the people either supported it or didn't care. We're just trying to give the lie to this original story from the Telegraph, was picked up by the Mail. And that's part of our point. The Telegraph's dishonesty, I'm going to call it that, in covering this story, created a right-wing media kind of feeding frenzy and an online pylon, and it resulted in threats of violence against me online, which didn't exist before. None of this existed before. And it's a great example of how right-wing politicians or media can intervene in an issue and be divisive and inflammatory, and then they can actually cause the thing they're looking for.
So do you think that that flag then, was it representative of the views of the people who firstly work in your building, but also who live in the area? Do you think it was reflective of where they feel at the moment?
I think it does, based on my experience out on the streets. The opinion poll shows it very clearly. I think, 6% of people support the idea, two-thirds support or don't care about it. But my experience on the streets, all of the, I'm bumping into people everywhere, and actually protests have begun outside of our office. I'm pointing this way because that's the window where the banner is, and there's a protest point. And we've had regular protests now in favor of the banner, in support of Palestine and that kind of stuff. It's become a focal point. But I think in the country generally, opinion polls show this as well. The majority of Britons think that Palestine is being treated very badly, that the Palestinians deserve their own country, and Israel has gone too far.
As someone who's donated to Labour in the past, are you comfortable with the current trajectory or the current plan that the government have toward the crisis?
I don't think it's enough, but I don't think any government in the West has done enough. I think we're the world's biggest hypocrites when it comes to international law and moral standards and that kind of stuff. If you look at how we've treated Russia for the invasion of Ukraine, and then you look at how we treat Israel for the invasion of Palestine, the treatment of civilians in the Palestine case is multiple times worse than what's happening in Ukraine. But you've got crippling sanctions on the Russian economy, $300 billion worth of weapons and counting going to Ukraine to defend themselves. Look over at Palestine, no sanctions, weapons going to Israel to kill Palestinians with. And we are currently allowing a mass starvation. Millions of people are being starved to death by the Israeli regime. And what have we done in the West? A few harsh words.
Well, we've also got an arms sales exhibition currently on in London. Sadiq Khan has come out to condemn the exhibition. I wonder, do you think that that sends the right message right now to the world by us hosting this exhibition?
I think they happen all of the time, these exhibitions. And honestly, I don't think they're important. I think what's missing is consistency in our upholding of international law. I think the West is running scared of the United States, who are Israel's biggest ally. And while they protect them, nobody in the West will impose sanctions and do all the kinds of things that need to be done, with the exception, a notable exception today of Belgium, who've come out and said that they're imposing a range of sanctions. Now, they're not madly biting sanctions, but they're the beginning of something.
Let's just, you're going to have to indulge me a little bit on a couple of right wing, I suppose, tabloid-esque questions when it comes to the flag. You know, displaying this Palestinian flag, we're at a moment in time, as we've talked about already, where that there is fury in the country, and there has been a large sound made around flags and the pride that people currently don't feel in the British flag that they feel the country should have. Keir Starmer said that he displays the St George's Cross in his house. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has said she also does that. Why did you decide to display a Palestinian flag and not the Union Jack on the front of your building?
Palestine is a country under siege, and it has been for decades. It's been invaded and occupied by Israel since the middle of last century, in breach of United Nations, what do you call it, resolutions. The people there live it under an absolute literal siege. They have no access to the outside world by air or sea or land. Israel controls the borders completely, and it's basically an open prison camp. The conditions there are abominable. The last 2 years have seen a massive uptick in the abuse, the targeting of journalists, of aid workers, um, mad amounts of deaths and injuries. The snipers of the Israeli army targeting different body parts of children on different days of the week. It's just depraved. Now, Britain isn't suffering any of that. So I don't feel the need to wave the British flag in solidarity with the British people.
I suppose an argument that could be levied is, we've come out of 15 years of austerity. We've had, hundreds of thousands of excess deaths, a rising number of children in poverty. At what point do you think in the UK, how bad would it need to get before you display the St. George's Cross?
See the flag behind me? That's my actual, that's the flag of my heart. Green Britain is the country in my mind's eye that I spend my life working towards. And I'm a patriot. I believe in this country. I want rich people to pay more tax. For example, I want us to end child poverty. And we can do that with a wealth tax, for example. There are lots of things that I want to see and happen in our country to improve what the Tories left us with. Let's just say that. So I am a patriot. That's my flag. This is my country, and I won't stop.
Would you support someone's freedom of speech or freedom of choice if they wanted to fly an Israeli flag as large as yours, say, opposite to your building?
It's up to them, and it's up to them. You know, I don't know what to say because the answer simply is yes.
So Kemi Badenoch is in Aberdeen today. She is fighting against net zero. She is going to bring back British oil. What do you think about the speech that she's made today or the push that she's making? Is net zero dangerous?
I love it. I love it. I mean, she jumped on this bandwagon alongside Farage. They're kind of riding it together, really. Except I think she's riding shotgun. He's driving the wagon. I mean, the idea that net zero is bad for us is beyond stupid, actually. And bringing back British oil is beyond fact. The North Sea has got 10% of its capacity left that it originally had. 10%. It is going to run out in 10 years' time. There ain't nothing to bring back. What we should focus on is managing the transition so that there's no cliff edge and we see the operators of the North Sea abandon the sector in a particularly bad year. So we're putting out a report in a few days to propose a way to do that for the government to put its arm around the North Sea oil and gas sector and manage out this transition in a just fashion.
And what is that just fashion? I mean, have you had conversations with the government since they got into power about what that transition would look like? I mean, we were promised during the manifesto or during the election that there would be these huge structures built. We would be the hub of renewable energy, and it doesn't quite seem that there are spades in the ground just yet.
The transition is underway. There are, according to the CBI, nearly 1 million jobs in the net zero economy in our country right now. And there are more jobs in green energy than there are in fossil fuels. We're well into the transition. We're at 50% green electricity on the grid, and the North Sea has been in decline for decades anyway, and was going to decline net zero or not. That's just happening. So we're in the transition. The key, in my opinion, is in this last 10 years, we ensure the jobs in the industry and we maximize what's in the North Sea and avoid a cliff edge where investors, including mostly foreign investors, abandon the sector in a bad year for global prices of oil and gas. Now, we can do that, and we have a report out in a few days about how to do that.
So do you think Kemi Badenoch is wrong then when she says that net zero is costing people their jobs?
I think she's about as wrong about that as she is about her offer to go to Stanford and study pre-med.
Well, she would say that she was given that offer. Do you think then, I mean, the sort of, where do you think all of this anger and vitriol comes from then towards renewable energy? Because what we're told in many of the tabloids and some broadsheets is that net zero is costing the layman. It's costing normal people a lot of extra money, and getting rid of it would free up cash for them to have more disposable income. Why do you think that that narrative is being pushed if it's not true?
I think it's being pushed by people like Badenoch and Farage for political expediency. They need for themselves an angle, something to wedge themselves into the national conversation and the opinion polls and that kind of stuff. So they need a cause, and they've chosen to be anti-net zero, anti-green, anti-woke, all of that kind of stuff. And it's been a long time coming. We've seen it building up over the last few years. The right-wing media have their own agenda. Mostly they're owned by foreign tax haven-based billionaires that intervene in our country in the national conversation through the newspapers and other media channels. I think we ought to change media ownership laws to change that. The Telegraph itself, for example, is now 20% owned by Middle Eastern entities, oil-producing entities. 20% own the Telegraph. Guess what's happening? The Telegraph are running a string of anti-green energy, anti-net zero stories. You got to wonder if there's not a connection there, actually. The truth is, subsidies have existed always. And at the moment, we subsidize the oil and gas sector to the tune of nearly £20 billion a year. But these newspapers aren't writing about that. They're writing about the support that renewable energy has. Renewable energy is still cheaper than oil and gas, energy from the wind and the sun. We've got some market mechanisms we need to reform to get our bills down. We're lobbying for that. But the idea that green energy costs more and we can't afford net zero is for the birds. The CBI themselves say the green economy grew 10% last year and the year before, while the main economy, let's say, grew by just 1%. All of the opportunities are in the green economy.
Elon Musk is looking to make a play at renewable energy in the UK. Will you be working with him?
Not again. We tried to once a very long time ago, and it doesn't even matter. But we had some fun on social media. Actually, we suggested that the name of his energy company might be the White Power Company, and we stuck a little Ku Klux Klan head into the image. And I think he's a bad man. He's an extreme right-wing person. You've got to remember the Nazi-esque salute that he gave only recently. The way he treats workers, the way he treated all of those workers in government while he ran his dodgy Doge outfit. He's a bad man. I say we don't actually want him over here for anything. But interestingly, the regulator had, last time I heard, 8,000 objections from members of the public to the idea that he should have a license to supply energy. That's never happened before.
Why do you, I mean, it can't just be his views why you wouldn't want to work with him, because surely if he was the key to achieving 100% renewable energy, would you bend your principles to work with him?
Absolutely, but he's not. He's absolutely not. Anyway, he can't be trusted. Even if I bent my principles, he'd be ripping me off based on my experience so far of him. But look, we're well on the way to 100%. We don't need Elon Musk coming here to retail energy. There's plenty of people retailing energy. What we need are people to build green energy. He's not going to come to do that. So he's not even part of that equation.
Mm. All right.
In fact, he's a massive twat.